Look out your window right now. You probably see a road, maybe a fence, a mowed lawn, a power line cutting across the sky. It feels permanent. It feels like it was always this way. But 10,000 years ago, the ground beneath that road was something almost unrecognizable. It was louder, it was wilder, and it was full of animals the size of houses. You live on a tamed planet. You just don't know it. Before humans spread across every continent, Earth was not the quiet, balanced wilderness you picture when you imagine nature. It was stranger than that, bigger than that. For most of the last 2 million years, the land was dominated by giants. Mammoths, giant ground sloths taller than a giraffe, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, enormous flightless birds that could kill a man with one kick, herds bigger than any herd of elephants alive today, moving across landscapes that had no roads to interrupt them. This is called the Pleistocene megafauna. Mega meaning giant, fauna meaning animal life, giant animal life. And it wasn't rare, it was everywhere. Picture North America. Not the version you know, with its highways and suburbs, the real one. Camels roamed Texas. Yes, camels. Camels actually evolved in North America before ever reaching Asia. Lions larger than the ones in Africa today stalked the plains of what is now Kansas. Giant beavers the size of black bears built dams in rivers across the continent. Herds of horses, wild, native horses, grazed long before any European ship ever crossed the Atlantic. Why don't you know this? Why does the phrase giant beaver sound like a joke instead of a fact? Because almost all of it disappeared. And it disappeared fast. Paleoecologist Paul Martin spent much of his career trying to explain this vanishing. His research pointed to something uncomfortable. The extinctions line up, again and again, with the arrival of humans on a new continent. Not with a change in climate, not with an asteroid, with footsteps. Martin called it the overkill hypothesis. Wherever early humans arrived, Australia, the Americas, remote islands, the largest animals began disappearing within a few thousand years. Not because humans hunted every last one directly, though they hunted many. It was slower and more brutal than that. New predators entered ecosystems that had never seen anything like them. Animals that had evolved no fear of a small, cooperative, tool-using ape didn't know to run. Think about that for a second. Some of these creatures had never seen a human before. There was no instinct to flee, no inherited memory of danger. You could have walked up to a giant sloth 8 feet tall, and it might have simply looked back at you, unafraid, because nothing like you had ever existed before. That innocence didn't last. Within a few thousand years of humans reaching a continent, the biggest animals were gone. Australia lost its giant kangaroos and rhino-sized wombats not long after people arrived, roughly 45,000 years ago. The Americas lost their mammoths, mastodons, and giant cats within a few thousand years of humans crossing from Asia. Small islands lost their unique giant birds the moment the first boats landed. This wasn't one single event. It was a pattern. Ecologist Yadvinder Malhi has spent years studying what these giant animals actually did for the planet while they were alive, and the answer is more than most people expect. Megafauna weren't just big, they were engineers. A mammoth walking through a forest doesn't quietly pass through. It knocks down trees. It compacts soil. It spreads seeds for miles in its dung, some of which can only germinate after passing through a giant gut. Malhi's research suggests these animals kept landscapes open, mixed and fertile in ways smaller animals simply cannot replicate. Grasslands stayed grasslands. Forests stayed patchy instead of closing into dense, uniform canopy. Nutrients moved from rivers to hillsides, carried inside enormous bodies that grazed in one place and defecated in another. When the giants vanished, the landscape itself began to change. Forests thickened in places that used to be open plains. Nutrient cycles that had moved across continents for millions of years, powered by migrating giants, slowed down and localized. Some ecologists argue that entire biomes shifted in the wake of these extinctions, that the natural landscapes you see today, the ones environmentalists work so hard to protect, are actually the empty aftermath of something far richer that came before. You grew up learning that untouched wilderness is what nature looks like without humans. But even the wildest forest left today is, in a sense, a ghost of a bigger world, a world missing its largest characters. And it wasn't only the animals that changed. Before large-scale agriculture, the sound of the planet was different too. Ecologist and soundscape researcher Bernie Krause has recorded ecosystems across the world for decades, documenting what he calls the biophony, the layered chorus of insects, birds, and animals that once filled forests almost constantly, at volumes and complexity that most modern landscapes, thinned out by extinction and habitat loss, can no longer produce. Ancient forests were not silent. They were dense with sound in a way few places on Earth still are. So why does it matter now? You don't live among mammoths. You're not dodging saber-toothed cats on your way to work. Here's the strange part. The instincts wired into your brain were shaped by that older, wilder, more dangerous world. Not the tame one you actually live in. Your fear of the dark, your unease in tall grass, your flinch at a sudden shape moving at the edge of your vision. These reactions evolved in a world with real giant predators in it. You are running ancient software on a modern operating system. Your body still half expects a landscape that hasn't existed for 10,000 years. That's why an empty parking garage at night can spike your heart rate for no logical reason. Your ancestors' nervous systems were built for encounters your world no longer contains. The wiring stayed. The world changed underneath it. There's something else, too. Once the megafauna vanished and human hunting pressure eased on the largest animals, populations of humans grew faster. More food stability. Fewer catastrophic losses to predators. Some researchers connect the extinction of the giants to the population booms that eventually made large-scale farming, permanent settlements, and cities possible. In other words, the disappearance of the ancient giants may be part of why you live in a city today instead of a scattered band following migrating herds. The world you inherited was built, in part, on a world that had already been emptied out before recorded history even began. So, when you look at what feels like wild nature, a national park, a forest, a nature documentary, you're not looking at Earth before humans changed everything. You're looking at what was left after the first wave of change already happened, tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote anything down. The real before is almost impossible to picture, because nothing alive today saw it. No photograph exists, no written account. Only bones in the ground, seeds no modern animal can spread anymore, and instincts still buried in your own nervous system, waiting for danger that will never come again. Look out your window one more time. That fence, that mowed lawn, that quiet, ordinary evening. It isn't nature at rest. It's nature after the giants left, and you are still, in some small buried way, listening for them.